I'm going to hand over to Sarah Lawson, who will introduce the evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Sarah. I'm one of the physios, and I'm hoping tonight we'll be able to give you some good advice and hopefully find some solutions to that horrible dining room chair that you might be sitting on while you're working, or slobbing in the sofa with your laptop on your knee, giving yourselves aches and pains. First of all, I just want to introduce my team. There's myself, Paul Martin, who's going to do the presentation with me, who's my co-director. And then Nick, if you can just give a wave and a hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Are we okay?
And
well,
Alex Manos can't be with us tonight, and I don't think Stu's been able to link in. Person I've missed off as well, but it's very important to our team, is Emily. Emily, could you say hi, please? Emily, for those that you don't know her, is our massage therapist, but she's also in the club. She's a personal trainer, and she's also our swim coach. So we'll link into doing a lot of the exercise and stuff like that that you may want to do later, but we'll come to that. So Paul's going to take over from here, and we'll run through some bits. And like I say, I've got some videos to play, and then I'll take the last piece on. Paul, over to you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. So I'm going to do my best Chris Whitty impression and ask for slides to be moved on at appropriate times. What we're going to try and cover today is we're going to we've been through the introduction. We're going to have a look at the spine and what bits can hurt and why through the various areas of the spine. A few bits about what can go wrong and how, and part of this is going to be things like sitting and posture. We've got a couple of videos on how you might want to set up your desk and what we can do to prevent it or stop it from happening. We've got a slightly longer video there with some exercises and some ideas for exercises, and I understand that we're recording tonight, so if it all goes a little bit quickly tonight, then we can review it and go back and you'll be able to see some of what we've been discussing again. Can we have the next slide, please, Sarah? Thank you. So if we're looking at the spine, it's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate areas. You've got the cervical spine or the neck, which mainly supports the head and gives a lot of origin points for muscles to come off across the top of the back. We've got the thoracic spine, made up of 12 vertebrae, which sits in the middle, through the middle of the back. The key thing here is you've got the ribs that originate from there as well. So there's a few things that we can need to think about in that space in terms of how we sit and what pressures are applied through that area. Similarly, a lot of the muscles that attach into the shoulder blades, 2 triangles at the top of the back there, a lot of those will attach into the thoracic spine. So if you're getting some trouble around the inside of the shoulder blades or across the top there, then this is an important area to be considering. And lower down, we've got 5 lumbar vertebrae, which as we see, or you'll see in a moment, are shaped quite differently to some of the other ones. We have 5 fused vertebrae in the sacrum and the coccyx, which is 4 very small bones attached to the bottom, which used to be our tails, but has since retracted into that space. Next slide, please, Sarah. So if we look at the spine from the side, you can see the vertebrae in each different area are very differently shaped. So certainly in terms of size, obviously the lower down we go in the lumbar spine, the vertebrae are much bigger compared to the thoracic and the cervical spine, mainly because they're having to deal with a lot more load. And it's also in terms of the movement that we need to generate is going to be different in that space to what we're going to be generating in the thoracic and cervical spine. The planes of movement are fairly consistent throughout each area, but they'll vary widely in terms of the various ranges. For example, we can turn our necks a long way to either side. It's difficult in the lower part of the lumbar spine to generate that range of movement through those areas. And the reason for that is the shape of the joints. If we look at the cervical spine, they're obviously very small. There's a lot more ridges and bumps. The angles of if you have a look at the top, there's a very flat area. That's where one joint will attach onto the next. And gradually, as you go down through that spine, we'll have a look at this in a moment, the angle of the joints change, which means that there's different ranges of movement. The thoracic spine, you can probably see there's the large part that dangles down about 2/3 of the way up. There's a flat surface. That's where the ribs attach onto or connect with part of the vertebra there, and just horizontal to that to the left, is the space where the ribs originate. So within the thoracic spine, you've got 4 more joints than you would have in other places, which, as we know, joints can get stiff. These are extra areas that can get stiff through that area. And again, particularly if you're sitting for long periods of time, that might be something that can get tight and cause problems. As we come down to the lumbar spine, the intersections between the joints are much more vertical. So we're looking much more at sort of flexion extension movement there rather than a rotation. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Sarah. So this is a representation of the neck, and you can see at the top, the joint at the very top between the top cervical vertebrae and the skull itself is cupped in a way that allows us to bend, to extend and flex our necks. And that's where about 50% of that movement of the neck comes from, is just that single joint. The joint below that is the articulations between the two are very, very flat. So that's where the majority of rotation, and about half of the rotation comes from that area as well. So if you're getting a lot of tightness in through the top of the neck, those are two joint movements that you're going to struggle with, because if the muscles get tight, those movements are going to be restricted. Through the rest of the cervical spine, the load is managed a little bit more evenly, and you can start to see that the angles of the joints start to change a little bit more as you go down. Next slide, please, Sarah. So as I was mentioning just now, often what you tend to see in terms of poor posture and sitting, you tend to see what's called, or what's been termed, the upper cross syndrome. So there's nice X across where you have weakness in the deep neck flexors and the lower trapezius and serratus. We'll talk about trapezius later. You get some tightness in the pecs and the upper traps and levator scapulae, which pulls our heads and necks forwards. This is obviously a fairly common position. I'm sure some of us have found ourselves sitting like this after a couple of hours at the laptop. What this tends to mean is that we put a lot of load through the top of our shoulders. And so these areas can become quite tight. We'll talk about that in a little while. This position is often managed by the pecs being tight as well, which again rounds us. What we then end up with is the opposite muscles becoming weak and sometimes a little bit lengthened. So it's harder for us to control the muscles the way we need to. And a little bit later on, some of the exercises we've got to show you are going to be ways you can work to loosen off some of these areas and strengthen up the other areas that we need to. Next slide, please. So some of the common symptoms from the cervical spine, you can have headaches, obviously are quite common. And this doesn't happen in everything. Often neck pain is just basically that, neck pain and a restriction of movement. You find you can't turn your head or you can't tilt your head one way or the other. Some of the other things that can come from this area are headaches. The top 3 vertebrae have the top joints link into the area of the brain which deals with headaches. So you can get some headaches that can be resolved through some work through the back of the neck. In certain circumstances. Arm pain is quite common. A lot of the nerves that come out then go down through the arm, will come out through the lower part of the cervical spine. So if you're having some tightness in there, or if you've got some tension because your shoulders are quite rounded, that can put some pressure onto that area, causing pain going down the arm. Similarly, pins and needles, you can have disruption of the nerve sensation, which can cause a pins and needles feeling, and also with circulation, numbness can become a part of that as well. Carpal tunnel can come about as part of stiffness in the neck. That tends to be a bit more of a slightly more complex thing, often related to broader sitting and pressure applied to wrists and the amount of wrist work being done. But certainly the cervical spine will play a part in that. And dizziness can be something that you can experience as well with neck pain, and it's something to be mindful of. Next slide, please. So this is a representation of the trapezius muscle. Rather unimaginatively, the 3 areas are named the upper, middle, and lower fibers. The upper fibers, if we look at where that originates from, right at the base of the spine, coming out to the top of the shoulder. Can we go back, please? Thank you. Often this is the area where people will feel quite tight and uncomfortable, and it's often because the shoulders are rounded and forward. The solution for a lot of people in that situation is just to try and stretch the necks out. The fact is, at that point, the muscle is feeling tight because it's pretty much stretched as far as it's going to go. So stretching it further won't necessarily sort the problem out. It might give you some short-term relief, but it's not going to change things. The way to release a lot of the tension here, and it's something we talk about later, is to engage the lower fibers of traps, or the more purple part of the muscle. And the way you can do that is to almost think about drawing an X across your back. And if you just sit up a little bit and just draw the shoulder blades back gently, you'll probably feel tension through this part of the upper fibers of traps just ease off a little bit. But we talk about that a bit more in one of the videos later. Similarly, you can see where the shoulder blades are originating just underneath the purple parts there. A lot of the sensation you get around there and often pain you get around there, there's some muscles underneath that attach into the spine itself. So if the thoracic spine is quite stiff, that's going to offer a little bit of resistance into movement across that area and can cause problems as well. Next slide, please. So with the thoracic spine, obviously, as we spoke about before, the ribs are a major part of what goes on in the thoracic spine. So any sort of deep breathing and coughing and sneezing are big issues for thoracic spine if you have a problem there. Chest pain, again, where that's going to come up is going to be important. One of the main functions of thoracic spine, given the shape of and the orientation of the joints, is on rotation, twisting and turning. So if you're getting a block on twisting and turning through the trunk, that can often be an issue with the thoracic spine that might need to have a little bit of work on. Burning between the shoulder blades, again, some of that can refer down from the cervical spine. There are a couple of parts of the neck that refer down into that area, but also, as we saw just now with trapezius, there's a lot going on between that and the spine itself. So if those muscles are on a stretch or on a pull because the shoulders are rounded, you can get a lot of burning in between that area. The other thing about the thoracic spine to bear in mind is that a lot of the nervous system that passes down, that deals with our fight and flight reactions or our resting and digesting systems, they all pass through that area. So if you're feeling abnormally fatigued or tired, this can often be a posturally related issue that you're putting a lot of strain onto that area. And so a lot of these things, there's reaction at a lower level under there that can cause you some problems in that space as well, which may not be expressing itself in terms of pain. But if you're feeling more tired and fatigued than normal, changing your posture can have a positive impact on that. Next slide, please. So going to the lumbar spine, just a few little things here, some of the commonly used names for some of the conditions. Lumbago is an interesting one. It's been around for a long time. It basically refers to centralized back pain. So pain in the lower part of the spine, which doesn't really go anywhere and is aching. There are lots of reasons why that comes in, but it's generally in and of itself, it's more nagging and irritating than anything else. People talk about sciatica. This relates to the sciatic nerve, which passes down the back of the leg from the lumbar spine. This is often related to discs or sometimes from hip tightness in and around some of the muscles in the hip. But that can be a radiating leg pain that goes down. It can also be a shooting or a stabbing or a burning that goes down, which would be a little bit more related specifically to the nerve itself. People talk about slip discs, and that in and of itself is a massive area. Discs themselves that sit between each of the vertebrae act like shock absorbers. And for the most part, you get to a certain age, and when you have a scan, it's going to show that some discs have bulged out a little bit, basically through attrition through the lives we lead. The problem comes when they move far enough, they start to sit on nerves, and that can become a problem. But everybody seems to know someone that's had a bit of a slip disc that's absolutely ruined their lives. We do see disc problems fairly consistently, fairly regularly, and for the most part, they're generally minor. When they're big, they're bad, but for the most part, they can be easily sorted out. So common symptoms for lumbar spine problems: sit to standing pain, and something to try there is to move and push up through your heels a little bit more. That limits the amount of bending forward you need to do. Sometimes pain on long-term sitting for more than an hour can start to bring on back pain, and often that's because of a position you're adopting just through the amount of time you've been sitting. Coughing and sneezing or laughing are often, if you're having pain on that can suggest a problem with the lumbar spine as well. Pain down the leg, and sometimes it can be in isolation from the spine itself. So people can often get calf pain or hamstring pain for no reason apart from the fact that they're doing a lot more sitting. The calf and or the hamstring themselves are fine. It's just a problem with the lumbar spine. The muscle spasms in the lower back are quite common as well. There are a number of muscles around there that will be working to support you, and if they're not doing the job, then other ones will kick in. They may not be designed to do that job, so they'll tighten it up and spasm, and that can cause issues. So sometimes the solution to that is to look at the right muscles to work for you. Next slide, please. So unsupported sitting, and I'm sure we've found ourselves in this sort of position before, where you're kind of slouched on a sofa with shoulders rounded. Again, this is just sort of upper cross position where your shoulders are round, your thoracic spine's rounded as well. We're putting a lot of pressure through the tops of the shoulders. The shoulder joints themselves can be under a little bit of pressure in this space as well, but also the amount of pressure that we're applying on the discs will tend to start to move them back a little bit and start to give some issues into that space. There's, again, we'll look at some solutions to that in some of the posture videos a bit later on, and working some of the abdominal muscles to support you can change that. The other thing that's worth thinking about if you do find yourself in this position is to take yourself further back into the sofa and maybe just put something into your back to support you, and that's something we cover a little bit later. So again, certainly in times where everybody's at home homeschooling and sitting, games, TV, reading, kids are pretty robust, but certainly for the teenagers where they're growing and developing quickly in short periods of time, sometimes the muscles don't keep up with the way the bones are growing, so you get general tightness, which tends to force you into a certain position. It's just as important for your kids that they've got a decent seating setup to be either sitting at home reading or doing their homeschooling, because for the most part, school chairs are one size fits all. And as I'm sure any of you that have had kids will know, you can have 14-year-olds at 6'2" and 14-year-olds at 4'11". So there can be some fairly sizable changes, and if everyone's sitting on the same seats, it may not work for everybody. So just be mindful that they've got the right sort of seating solutions as well. Regular breaks activities are very important as well, just to break the day up. So making sure those are factored in is important. So we've got a little bit of a video now. This is a few tips on how to set up a workspace at home and how to work on a few ideas on how to sit that we've discussed to this point, and hopefully this should give a little bit more clarity into some of the things that we were talking about just now. So if we have a look at the sitting position here, you can see that her shoulders are slightly forward compared to where her ears are. So ideally what we want to do is correct that position. If we sit up from the lower part of the pelvis, so sit forward here, tilt forwards here, immediately get a more upright spinal position, but also the shoulders start to come back. Now that might be a bit difficult to manage. Use a small roll-up towel, pop that in just above the pelvis. So if you then try and sit back from the hips, you still maintain an upright position. You can use any kind of weight you like. The point here is if we tip the pelvis forwards, the rest of the spine will stay upright. Sit forwards and up from the pelvis, just move forwards there, then it becomes easier to bring the shoulders back. Again, this is a difficult position to maintain for prolonged periods of time. So again, small rolled up towel in the lower back, just above the pelvis, can help support that position a little better. So another thing we can do to help with sitting on a solid chair, and sometimes an office chair as well, is to put a sit fist underneath when we sit, and providing your backside is sitting into the middle, it will work to tilt you forward slightly, so that will help to encourage that position. If we put that into the chair so it's right towards the back of it, then if you sit yourself down, we should find that it's a little bit easier for you to sit forwards and upright. So if we're sitting on a stool, obviously we don't have any back support. One of the other issues is often the feet come off the floor. That's something we'll look at a little bit later. But even in this position, you can start to see, even whilst there is some work being done around the lower parts of the pelvis here, the shoulders are starting to creep forward, so that is again going to put some tension onto the shoulders. So there was a trend a few years ago for sitting on gym balls. The one thing we see here is, again, there's no back support. The second thing is, after a long time, it becomes very, very difficult to support yourself in this position. These things are quite unstable, so you have to work very, very hard to maintain a static posture. Not a great idea, and often if the ball is too big or too small, it has big implications for how the hips and the knees and the feet set up relative to where you're able to sit and work. With the shoulders rounded forwards, there's often a lot of tension in here. If you sit up again from the lower part of the pelvis, as the shoulders come back, a lot of that tension in the upper thighs of the traps is released. So when this area gets tight, just by correcting the position down here,
you can take a lot of the tension out of the top of the shoulders as well. So one of the other things we tend to see a lot is the chin tends to poke forwards, tightening of the muscles in the back of the neck, which can cause tension coming up into the back of the head. So we get a lengthening through here, a shortening through here. So once again, if we sit ourselves up nice and straight, first thing that happens is there's a bit of correction here. But what we'll do later is look at some exercises to help retain that head on neck position, which will take a lot of the tension out of here and stretch this area, but also work these muscles in here to help keep the head supported better on the neck. So one of the key issues we see here is that the feet are unsupported on the floor. It can be very useful just to put a little block underneath the feet, just to raise them up a little. So the next thing we need to look at is something to support with our back. So we have our towel, we can help just to give a little bit more support into there. But the problem we have at the moment is that the screen is a little bit low. This middle of the screen needs to be level with the line of sight. So if we raise the screen a little bit, that will start to help things. But you can use books or whatever you need to just to lift it up. And what you want to have is that the screen is at the level of your eyes. Something to try and set yourself up with is the rule of the semicircle. So for this, if you pop your elbows onto the desk and just roll your hands out into a semicircle, everything you need to work should be within that semicircle. Your mouse and keyboard, and in this case the printer, is right at the fingertips there. Now sometimes the mouse can get a little bit lost in space, so here's a quick tip you can do just to make sure you're keeping everything in the right space. So if you're sitting too far away from the table, this can start to put a little bit more strain on some of the muscles we've spoken about before. So by having to reach to get your hand onto the mouse, you're starting to again put strain through the upper fibers of the traps, which are going to be tight and under pressure. As you sit yourself forwards, you should find that you're able to control that better, take some tension out of the shoulder. So where you are relative to the desk is really important in terms of how you're sitting yourself up.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to take over from here. So just to recap, I think one of the key things to note out of that was the chair that we had our model on was way too big for her. So we were having to adapt it to that position. Commonly, I do lots of workstation assessments all the time, and when I go into offices, I think the second posture here is probably the thing I see the most, to the point of even people having their feet on the desks. It's fine, it's kind of a relaxing position, but again, we're massively overloading the thoracic, the middle part of the spine, and we want to get back into that position. The one thing I would say to you, the most important thing that you can do long term is to get a chair that fits you. If you get a chair that fits you, it fundamentally will support you properly, and it will take out the excessive stresses and strains. What we've shown you today has been much more about adaptations that you can make for when you don't have that facility. But investing in a really good chair, I just think is well worth your while. If you're spending a lot of time working from home, or with the way the world is going to go, possibly we might now see that more people are working from home and less from the office. And for those of you that do work for big corporates, it is their responsibility to make sure that you have adequate support and a safe working environment at home as it is in the office. So they are legally obliged to help you. So if you have any worries, you should go to your HR department because they can still help you. So very quick recap. The first thing I say to people when you sit in any chair is don't forget, sit your bum right to the back of your chair, because if there's any chance that chair can support you, you have to be able to get your bum to the back so that your lower part of your back is sitting to the back of the chair. Try and achieve this kind of 90 degrees rule. And again, try and make sure also that the gap between the back of your knee and the seat is a good 1 to 2 inches. If you're shorter or you have too long a seat pan and that back of that chair is digging into the back of your knees, that can also cause problems within itself. So my rule of thumb is to everybody, when you sit down, sit your bum to the back of your chair, wriggle your bottom into the back, get as much support as you can out of that chair. If you can change your chair in any way, try and bring that back of the chair in as much as you can. And then make sure you bring yourself 1 to 2 inches away from your desk. That's where you should be sitting. Do your semicircle that we showed in the video and keep that mouse in its box, because that is, again, one of the biggest problems I see when I go into offices. So just to recap, there's your primary zone. For those of you that are on the phone a lot, either get your headset. Most of us now, we've got earbuds, we can basically plug in, use that as much as possible. If you are on the phone, that phone, if you're using it on a regular basis, needs to sit in that secondary zone. You shouldn't have to use your hand and reach much further. You should be able to sit your back to the back of the chair, reach for your phone and grab it, okay? You shouldn't have to be coming off the front of your desk to get your phone. It should be in secondary zone. But like I say, otherwise, headsets, everything like that is so much better. There may be some of you that work off multiple screens that are on this call. The only thing I would say on multiple screens, because I often fit 5 screens to a client, is you keep it balanced. So if you have a primary screen, logically you put it in front. If you're working off 2 screens equally, you put them in so the sensor is in front of your nose. The 2 screens come in so they're equally balanced. And again, looking at the height, if you're racking up one on top of another, you just have to work with it. And sometimes I say to people, if they have to have a dominant screen on one side, every day swap your screens around, because you can often move your whatever's on each screen. So try and keep it balanced so you're not constantly looking one side more than the other. Okay, so we're going to just play one more video. It's a little bit longer, but this will just give you some ideas of exercises that you can do to help relieve those aches and pains.
Sarah, could you just unmute?
First of all, you need your feet a little way away from the wall, and your shoulders press gently backwards, okay? Press the back of your head on the wall, and what you want to do is draw the chin inwards, keep the back of your head on the wall, slide the back of your head up. What you should feel is a good stretching through the back of your neck, and some work being done just under the chin there. You want to hold that for 6 to 8 seconds and relax. And you can do that 5 to 6 times every couple of hours. If your head's a little way forward and it's difficult to get back without arching your head back to the wall, you can use a towel to support the head in that position. So rest back against the towel. Good. And then you can draw the chin in, do the exercise there. So the deep neck flexor exercise can be done lying on the floor as well. In this position with the knees bent up, again, the head is drawn down towards the floor, keeping the back of the head on the floor. Draw the chin downwards towards the floor, and what you should feel is some work underneath the chin and a good stretch up the back of the neck. So if your head is a long way forward and it's difficult for you to touch the floor without overarching your neck, roll up a small towel and support that position behind your head. If you then draw the chin in there, you'll have a similar sort of effect. This is an exercise for the lower fibers of trapezius. While these are working, it's going to take some of the pressure off the upper fibers of trapezius as well. The first thing we need to do when you're lying on the front is make sure you've got a roll-up towel under your forehead so your nose and mouth are exposed and so you're able to breathe. Squeeze the tummy to tuck the hips underneath so the back stays flat. The next movement is if we pull the shoulders back, so we're drawing an X across the back. This is the area where you should feel it working. Here's the bottom of the shoulder blades, it's just below there. And hold that for about 5 to 10 seconds and then relax. Let everything go. Tuck the tummy in again to start with. X across the back, draw the shoulder blades back and down. Good. You may feel when you do this that some of the tension that's in the top of the shoulder starts to ease away a little bit. And then relax. And you can repeat that 8 to 10 times. So an exercise you can do at your desk is if you have a swivel chair, if you keep your hands onto the desk, keep your shoulders fixed facing forward. Use your hips just to turn the chair from side to side. And what you should feel is a good rotation through the back. If you don't have a swivel chair, then you can replicate this exercise by just reaching around to each side of your hip. We can stretch the same muscle from the bottom upwards. And the way to do that is if we have our shoulders back against the wall and back flat, to shift the hips over towards the right. So we stretch out the right side. That's it. Good. And then back to the middle. Keep the shoulders level. And you should feel that stretch in the same position again. If you need to work it a little bit more, flatten your back against the wall. You should feel a good stretch down through the left side there. So bent knee wipers. The aim of this exercise is just to mobilise the back and to stretch some of the muscles out of the lower back. So keeping the knees pointing upwards to start with, roll over to one side, back up to the middle, Then back over to the other side, keep your shoulders flat against the floor or against the bed, whatever you're using to do your exercises on. What you should feel is a really good stretch as you go over towards the right. You should feel a good stretch down through the left side of your back. As you correct the legs up towards the middle, you should feel the same muscle shorten and tighten as it helps to lift the legs up. As you roll over towards the right, you should feel the same area stretching out on the right hand side and then working as you come back. To stretch the lower back out, providing you don't have any problems with the disc, a nice stretch to do is to bring one knee up to the chest at a time and hug it in nice and close. This will stretch out through the back side and through the lower parts of the back. Good squeeze for 5 to 10 seconds, then change legs. As you lower the leg down, squeeze the tummy gently to support the leg on the way down. Squeeze the tummy in and relax. Squeeze the tummy in again to pick the other leg up. Hug it up into your chest. Stretch, 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 stretch. Squeeze the tummy and lower the foot back now. And you can repeat that 6 to 8 times each side, as much as you need to feel some relief. Bridge is a nice exercise for the abdominal muscles and for the glutes. To do this, start in the bent knee lying down position or crook line. For this, we want to keep the ribs flat on the floor, so don't allow the ribs to pop up as you come up. First thing to do is tuck the tail underneath, so roll the pelvis back and upwards towards the ceiling, and then segment by segment, roll up so that your hips come up off the floor. Roll up, roll up, roll up, roll up. Good, keep the ribs down. Once you get to the top there, slowly roll back down. Again, segment by segment, pop yourself back down onto the floor. So some exercises you can do to help work the back muscles and some of the arms and legs as well. Starting in this position, you will need to be careful if you're having problems with your wrist or with your shoulders, best not to try it. The aim is keep the back flat, as we are at the moment. We'll start with the arms, so reach on one arm forwards and up. Try not to shift too much. Try not to drop one side of the shoulders and back down. And then the left arm. Good, keeping the back straight. And you should feel that working around the shoulder and then the tummy. Hand back down. The next level for this is you can straighten out the right leg behind you. Again, keep the pelvis level. What you need to do here is keep the pelvis nice and straight, so you have to work quite hard on the tummy for that. Change position, change legs. Again, don't lose that tummy, tuck the tummy underneath. Keep the legs straight, good, and then back down. Okay, and then you combine opposite arm and leg. So right arm, left leg. Keep the back straight, use your tummy, and back down. Straight, get the abs switched on. Good. And back down. This is a nice exercise to do to work some of the muscles across the back to help support you if you're sitting for long periods of time. So this is an exercise called thread the needle, which is nice to get a little bit of rotation through the back. Again, starting in the same 4-point position. With this, what we're going to do is pass one arm behind the standing arm and stretch as far as you can across. So you drop one shoulder, keep the other one up, rotate through the back, follow the hand through with your eyes, back to the middle, then repeat to the other side. Again, you can hold that stretch for a little while if you want to, or if you want to use it as a bit more of a mobilizer, and keep consistent movement through the sequence. For something a little bit more intense, coming into a kneeling plank is quite a nice way of working the abdominal wall. So if you come down onto your elbows and walk your knees back slightly, okay, get your shoulders over your elbows, and what you want to see is a straight line between the shoulder and the knees. And from that position, as you're holding that, tuck the tail underneath, so the abs are working, so tuck your feet underneath, good. And from there, if you straighten up one knee, hold for a couple of seconds and then back down, then change. The aim here is as you straighten up the knee, that side of the abdominals should be working much harder than the other side. You only need to rest in that position for a couple of seconds. The abdominal wall tends to work fairly dynamically. It doesn't tend to stay statically holding. It tends to be consistently switching on and off as we require the muscle to move. So this is a nice way of training that. Bend the knees slightly. Facing forward. Okay. In that position, keep your eyes in between your hands. Hips stay steady, turn around towards the right. Good. Go again. That's it. Good. And again. So if you squeeze this glute here, that should help keep you forward. There, good.
Okay, so there were just some ideas basically of, there are many different exercises you can do, but there are some ideas that you could possibly use to try and help relieve those aches and pains. And also strengthening is so important in the fact that, you know, that will, the greater stability you've got, the less likely you are to get those loaded issues. So just in conclusion, you really need a good chair. If you can afford to invest in one, it's really worth every single penny. You'll always check that your desk and your screen height, that's something very easy to change. Don't forget, I think I mentioned it later, but you can also look at standing desks as well. Make sure your feet are flat on the floor and supported. Light is obviously very important because again, visual problems, other things like that can all come into pain and fatigue and workstations. So we always try and get adequate lighting, as much natural lighting as possible. And diet and regular breaks. I think regular breaks is so important. If you sit for 2 to 3 hours in your desk and not get up and move, you're going to get some kind of overloading kind of pain and problems. We try and encourage people to get up every 40 minutes. I've been known to encourage people to put screensavers on their computers to make them kind of be aware when they've been sitting for 40 minutes, put alarm clocks on, anything like that. Or also look at what you're actually doing during the day, plan your day a little bit. So if you know, for instance, that you might have a document that you need to read and you don't have to be at your screen, then go and lie on the sofa and read that document. Or, you know, if you've got a phone call that you need to make and it's something you can make, stand up, make your phone call, walk around, plan your day a little bit, think of some alternatives that you could use so you're not permanently sitting at your desk. Sensible diet's very much linked in with health and well-being, so goes without saying. I think the only thing I would mention at the moment is also vitamin D is very important. We see a lot of people that are deficient in vitamin D, and it is well known to be linked in with kind of multiple muscle ligament type injuries as well. So it's worth having a look at as well. Not to forget the other members of the Lansdowne team. We have got lots of online sessions that the sports team are doing, yoga, Pilates, spin, HIIT classes, functional exercises. So do that. There's lots of online personal training. We also have an in-house nutritionist that you can access. If you need more information about those, contact Sports, Leanne, and I know they do their newsletters out as well. This is just something that we've been given a 25% discount off. I just wanted to let you know about it. We get no commission for this. There's no value in this at all for us. It's a company I've worked with for over 15 years. They're called Posture Right. They sell everything you could possibly want for a home work setup. I've given some examples of a chair. An RH400 is probably the chair I recommend at the top end. Obviously, you can go much higher. So the chair that you saw us demonstrating on is about £2,500 chair, just because it's leather. But the RH400 is a very, very good chair, and I can pretty much fit it to absolutely anybody. They're doing a new version, which is the 220, which is slightly cheaper. It's just as good. And now they've actually come up with a home worker chair. It's actually really good. You have to assemble it yourself. They won't come and fit it for you. But if you want something that's kind of in a much better and lower end range, it's really good because the back does go up, the seat pan goes forwards and backwards, and it does go up and down. So it's actually really effective. Standing desks are worth looking at really if you are tied to your desk for 10 plus hours a day. Laptop stands, don't forget you're not supposed to work on a laptop for longer than about 40 minutes. So if you do have only a laptop, you really need to put it up on a stand, have a separate keyboard and mouse, and work it in that position. And they sell footrest, incline reader boards. If you're reading lots of documents, put a board in front of you so your documents are slightly more raised. That's our discount code. If you put it in the shopping trolley at the end, you will get 25% off. And that's it basically from us. We are available for now for questions and anything else basically.
We have a question from, oh, sorry, Bob. Yes, I will be able to send it to you. Any recordings, if anybody wants to see anything again, just let me know. I'll make a note of you, Bob, but anybody else, you can email Social Butterfly or you can email sports and we will get a recording sent over to you. I had a couple of people message. I know that we've also got book club on at the minute. So a couple of people said, thank you very much, but they've had to leave for book club. So thank you. Is there any easy way to resolve pain in between the shoulder blades? Andrew's asking the best way for that.
I think it is sitting to the back of your chair as much as possible, so that you're offloading all this part of your shoulder. I tend to find the exercise that we showed where we just spin from side to side, take your feet off the floor, hold onto your desk. I don't know if you can see my screen if I drop it down a little bit, but I'm physically holding onto my desk and spinning. I find that really nice. Another thing that I encourage people to use is a full length Pilates roll, and just lying on it with your arms outstretched and taking lots of nice big deep breaths in. It really opens up your thoracic, your rib cage. So there's just some ideas, but we're happy to chat with anybody and give them, or come in, have a session, and we can show you lots of exercises for it.
We just have one more question in the chat, please. Have you got any advice on working with a standing desk, the best arm and elbow position to avoid hip pain while standing?
Yeah, so standing desks, I think the first thing you have to say about standing desks is that they're not supposed to be stood at all day long. You really need to build up your time on a standing desk, starting off with kind of 10-15 minutes in the morning and the same again in the afternoon. So when you are standing, you still want that same 90-degree angle, okay? So obviously it's dependent on your height, but you obviously don't want it so high that you're up here or so low that you're leaning forward onto your desk or your keyboard is too far away. It's completely the same rules. You use that zone, use your semicircle, and you should be able to work with that. The thing I mentioned to people is make sure you're standing on both your feet equally. You've got equal pressure on both feet. What I tend to see, or the other thing, you can stand in a stance position as well. That's another thing that some people do, but I tend to say to people, don't stand for longer than 40 minutes. So you do a section in the morning, a section maybe late morning, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, but don't stand for long periods.
The other thing as well is if you find yourself kind of swayed into the desk, that can put a lot of pressure on the lower back and the hips. So it's whether you're able to almost tuck your tail underneath you a little bit, which will help to engage some of the abdominal wall, and that will support things up a little bit better higher up and maybe take some of the pressure off there.
Thank you. And then we just have one final question as well in the chat about the chairs that you mentioned, Sarah. What's the biggest difference between the RH200 and the RH220?
Yeah, the honest truth is there isn't. The RH400 they brought out, I've been working with it probably over 10 years. They very recently brought out this new 220 version. It's slightly cheaper. They say it's actually better. I haven't actually played with it. It is exactly the mirror image of the 400. It just has some new features on it. And weirdly enough, they dropped the price on it. But there is no difference at all. I just put it in there because if you go on the website, you'll see them and they look very similar. But it's slightly cheaper, but it's as good as far as I'm aware.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I don't have any other questions in the chat, and I hope people have enjoyed it this evening. If anybody wants any recordings or anybody wants any further details, we have all of the information of all the physios. You can book a separate appointment to see any of our physios as well, and they are currently still working in the club. So anyone who lives local and can pop in, it's a really great opportunity. It's not as busy at the moment as we usually are, obviously because of the lockdown. But if you want any further information, you can always contact Social Butterfly or Sports. Sorry,
can I just mention, I can really efficiently do workstation ergonomic assessments on Zoom. It's actually quite easy to do. You just need another person with you who can hold the camera so I can watch you working. I can do them in about 30 minutes and then give you your own personal advice and help you redo your setup. And we just do it as a Zoom call.
Amazing. It all sounds so great. So if anybody wants any more information, please just drop any one of us an email and we will send you in the right direction. But thank you so much, Sarah, Paul, Nick. I know all the other physios that joined, Emily. Thank you for this evening, and keep an eye out because we are planning on doing some more sessions like this that you might find useful, especially during the lockdown. But thank you so much for this evening, everyone. Thanks everybody for joining as well. And